Once upon a time, somewhere in the middle of nowhere, a young boy named Kenny lived with his unique family. It's been years now since Kenny, his little brother, and his mother moved with their grandma. Kenny and his little brother would always fight each other for little things. Sometimes Kenny would just beat up his little brother, and Kenny's mother would say to him, "Stop beating up your brother, Kenny. You haven't seen anything yet." Kenny's mother would always tell him this. So one day, Kenny parked all his stuff, grabbed his dog, and told his mother that he was going into the world to see for himself what she meant by he hasn't seen anything yet. Kenny and his dog got on their journey. As they went, the days turned to nights, and a night never missed a day. The wind whispered but put no fear in Kenny's heart. Kenny and his dog continued. Then they saw lots of sharp cutlasses brushing a big field of tall grasses without any human being holding them. Kenny was amazed, but he didn't get scared, so they continued. They kept on going. Then they came across big axes cutting down tall trees by themselves. Kenny spoke, but no one responded, so he and his dog continued again. They kept on going, then boom! They saw the trees and the big field burning in huge flames, but no one was there controlling the fire. Kenny is still not shocked, so he and his dog continued. They were tired, so they stopped for a rest. The next morning they continued, then they came across a bunch of hooks digging through the ground and planting rice seeds in the ground. Kenny stretched his eyes wide open but still couldn't see anyone there. "Can we get water, please?" Kenny shouted, but no one answered. This didn't stop Kenny and his dog. They continued. Kenny and his dog were thirsty and couldn't find a drop of water to drink. As they went, Kenny cut a tiny rope in his way and a huge stream of water flowed from it. They quenched their thirst real good and continued. Kenny closed his eyes for a second, and when he reopened them, he saw a full-grown rice farm being cut down and packaged by a bunch of little butter knives. He said hello, but no one answered. Kenny was motivated now to see what was ahead. They continued, then they reached a small town. The time was quiet, like the people there were ghosts, but they weren't. They stared at Kenny and his dog as they walked through the center of the town slowly while looking around. Then, out of nowhere, a beautiful princess appeared and took Kenny and his dog to her quarter. The news reached the king the next morning, and the king ordered the princess to turn the visitors over to him, but she refused. The next day, the princess went to the king and told him she wanted to marry to Kenny, but the king said no. The king said, "My dear daughter, I love you, and this is why I have kept you away from the world. I don't want you to see anything and fall in love. If you do fall in love, I would die. But because I am a great king and a great father, I will give you a chance. If you really want to marry this guy, he must fight every strong man in and around this village. And if he wins all the fights, then he shall marry you." The princess gave Kenny some special superpowers and told him to take the challenge if he loves her. Kenny did. So took the challenge. Kenny fought all the men in and around the village and defeated them all, but the king refused to let the princess marry Kenny. Then the king ordered Kenny to be killed. The princess took Kenny inside, gave him some of the king treasure and told him to run. Kenny and his dog took off, and the king and his soldiers chased after them. They ran till there was nowhere else to go. Then Kenny saw a tall tree and climbed it, and the soldiers climbed after him. As the soldiers got closer to Kenny, he started chanting, "Tree turn tall, tree turn tall." The tree grew taller, and the soldiers were afraid and got down from the tree. Then Kenny started to chant in the reverse, "Tree turn short, tree turn short," and the tree would start to shorten again. Kenny and the soldiers went back and forth with this. Then Kenny switched off for a second and mistakenly dropped the king's treasure, but his dog quickly picked it up and swallowed it. The soldiers chased the dog. Kenny got down from the tree and chased after them. When Kenny caught up with the dog and the soldiers, they were already at his grandmother's house. The king was talking back and forth with Kenny's mother. Then the king saw Kenny and told his soldiers to go after him. Kenny's little brother appeared from nowhere with a bolt and arrow, shot it at the king in the back. The king fell and died. The soldiers surrendered. Kenny and his dog returned to the village. He married the princess and became the new king. The princess and Kenny lived happily ever after. The dog returned the treasure back to Kenny, and this is how man and dog became best friends. As a man, always keep one or two friends in dogs. The end. You Haven't Seen Anything Yet, written by King Arnold.